Thank you very much for having me, and a special thank you to the Gill Foundation, which I have admired for a long, long time. I run the Center for Community Change, which is one of the country's largest support centers for community organizing in low-income communities and communities of color across the country. And we see ourselves as part of a broader movement for social and economic justice in the country, and see ourselves as having an obligation and a commitment to building bridges across lines of difference. So I want to pick up on this question of why immigration is fundamentally an LGBT issue. So I have three reasons. The first reason is that many immigrants are themselves LGBT. I know, I can speak from personal experience. I've been gay and immigrant as long as I can remember. And this was brought home to me actually very powerfully. I did a star turn on Glenn Beck's show last year. It was an involuntary star turn, let me add. And you know how he has this wall up where he puts the enemies of Western civilization? I had very prominent placement. I was to the right of Van Jones. Thank you. Yes, it's a great honor. I was to the right of Van Jones, to the left of Valerie Jarrett, and underneath, inexplicably, Mao Zedong. I still haven't figured that one out. But because many immigrants are LGBT, and the test for any social movement, in my view, is the attention that it places on the most vulnerable and marginalized, at a time at which immigrants are subject to hate and attack on two fronts, it is especially important that the LGBT movement rises, as it has been doing, in solidarity. And as Rachel said, the three stories that we heard about a family, a couple, deeply committed to each other, deeply committed to their kids, at risk of separation, of being broken apart. The story of Esmeralda, transgender person, subject to incredible abuse by virtue of her gender orientation. The story of Felipe and Juan, who, by the way, I had hoped would be here today. I don't think they are, but I did want to give them a shout out in case they are, who are being denied their dreams and their ability to contribute to this country by virtue of their status. All of this is the substance of what comprehensive immigration reform is about. So reason number two, why immigration matters so much to the LGBT community. I believe that the fight for LGBT equality in this country depends to a large extent on how immigrants come to define their views on LGBT equality. And this may be a provocative proposition, but let me lay it out. Our country is going through huge demographic change. We will be a majority-minority country by 2050. In many states, that's already the case. It is almost impossible to imagine passing progressive policy in places like Texas or Arizona or Colorado or Nevada or Florida and making it stick over the long term unless there is a deep and serious alliance between new immigrant communities and LGBT communities. So it's a matter of common self-interest. And the power of immigrant communities, I think, is just beginning to be felt. So over the last few years, we've seen marches and rallies involving literally millions of people taking to the streets to demand justice, to demand recognition, some of the largest mobilizations in American history on any issue. In the 2008 and 2010 elections, we saw new immigrant communities playing a key role in elections across the country, but especially in states in the Southwest and in Florida. So we're at the beginning of what it will be a long demographic curve that is going to fundamentally reshape the politics of the country. And just imagine how much power there is and could be if we can solidify this alliance between immigrant rights and the LGBT movement. So why does immigration matter to the LGBT community? The third reason I've got for you is because it's the right thing to do. So if, as LGBT people, we believe anything, we believe that there is a place in our society for everyone, that nobody should be forced to live a lie. And we now have 12 million people in this country, gay, straight, bisexual, transgendered, lesbian, who are living in the shadows, who live every day with a fear of being picked up separated from their families and deported, who are living in hiding. They are overwhelmingly good people who do often the backbreaking work that makes our country function, whether it's picking the vegetables and fruits we have at mealtime, cleaning our homes and hotel rooms, coming up with the entrepreneurial ideas to start new small businesses, revitalizing our communities and our culture. They are our neighbors, our workers, our family members, our loved ones. So for all those reasons, immigration reform should be a central priority of the LGBT community. So is there any good reason to believe that it's possible to forge this long-term alliance between the immigrant rights movement and the LGBT movement? I think there are several good reasons to think so. One is that we're already doing it. In many states around the country, immigrant rights organizations in Oregon and California and elsewhere, and LGBT organizations are working together to fight off the bad stuff and to push for the good stuff together. There's also a new and emerging leadership in the immigrant rights movement itself. Many gay and lesbian and transgendered and bisexual leaders of immigrant rights organizations who see themselves as part of a larger struggle for human dignity and who want to forge these alliances and partnerships. I also think the experience of being an immigrant and the experience of being lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered in our society is eerily similar. You know growing up that you don't quite belong. You have to learn how to read situations and people and environments to develop a certain kind of antenna in order to survive and get along. You become good at translating between cultures and operating in different worlds. And oftentimes you are forced to live in the closet, and the first step to freedom is stepping out of that closet. We also have an enormous amount to learn from each other. So I'm not even sure that you're aware of the extent to which the immigrant rights movement has really borrowed from and learned from the LGBT movement in fundamental ways. So all over the country last year, there were these beautiful, extraordinary coming out days led by young undocumented immigrants literally marching through the streets of Chicago, coming out as undocumented and unafraid. When it comes to ballot measures, fighting the right, fighting the hate, we've really borrowed from the leaders in the gay and lesbian community. And finally, as Janet said, we have the same opponents. The same people who want to shut the door to LGBT equality and take us back in time are the same people who are desperately afraid of the changing complexion of our country. So I want to be honest, though, that there are some real challenges to building this alliance, and I want to talk for a minute about those. We at the Center for Community Change and the grassroots coalition that we built over the last 15 years, last year came out publicly and loudly in support of UAFA, the same-sex partner legislation that Rachel has been such an incredible advocate for. And we faced a pretty dramatic and vitriolic attack from the more conservative elements of the immigrant rights field. So I'm very popular right now on right-wing Catholic blogs. You know, it's where like most of my hits seem to be coming in that direction. And the Catholic Church has been historically one of the largest funders of poor people's organizing, including immigrant organizing in the United States. And after we issued our statement, the church threatened to drop funding, and actually did drop funding, from a number of immigrant rights organizations. Now, I'm proud to say that not a single local immigrant rights organization that stood up for LGBT equality backed down, even when it meant a loss of money. Those grassroots groups, which typically operate on a shoestring, poor people are not very popular as a funding cause these days, they basically said, look, we'd rather lose our funding than lose our souls. We won't sacrifice LGBT members of our community. And so that's why it's so critical that the pro-LGBT elements of the immigrant rights movement receive the embrace and support, as we have been from such leaders as Haas and Gill and others, to support that leadership and to support that education that Janet was talking about that is so critical in communities. And it's also why the organizations in the gay and lesbian field that have stood up for immigrant rights play such a critical bridge role. And I really want to lift up the incredible leadership of NGLTF in this regard, which has done an amazing job standing up to the hate in Arizona, creating dialogues. I spoke to the NGLTF board meeting last year. It is incredibly important to have bridge leaders who see the bigger picture, who want to make the connections, and who are willing to roll up their sleeves and do it on both sides of the equation. So briefly, where do we stand today? Janet did a great job of covering it. I mean, the honest truth is the immigrant rights movement in this country faces an extraordinary crisis. The work of equality is the work of generations, not of years or legislative cycles, and we have a long way to go. And actually, I feel like we are learning a tremendous amount from the struggle of the LGBT community. One element I want to lift up about this crisis is, and what can be accomplished in the next couple of years, and it will be a very difficult couple of years. The current administration, the Obama administration, is deporting 400,000 people a year and has set an all-time record, higher than George W. Bush, higher than any other administration in the history of the United States. So think about that for a second. That means that 1,100 people every day are picked up out of their communities, almost all of them law-abiding, non-criminal, non-terrorist, hardworking nannies, dishwashers, hotel cleaners, etc., are separated and ripped out of their families, leaving children, husbands, lovers, partners, wives behind. So it's like a crisis every day of massive proportion. So my organization, with many others, is in the next month or two going to issue a challenge to the Obama administration to use its executive authority, which is substantial, to bring an end to this reign of terror that has been visited on immigrant communities all over the country, to stop the deportation of hardworking, non-criminal people who are contributing to the life of our country. And that is accomplishable in the next couple of years. I was in a meeting with the president last year where he told the story about how Franklin Roosevelt, when he received labor leaders into the White House who were pressing him to do something, that Roosevelt said, okay, you've convinced me, now make me do it. So we're going to take the president up on his challenge, and I feel like we've learned a lot from the courage and resilience of the LGBT community. I want to thank you for that. My last comment here will be that I think the LGBT movement and the immigrant rights movement are the two most vibrant, energetic social movements in the United States of America. And I know that we need your help as we enter a very difficult period of struggle over the next couple of years with challenges to very fundamental questions, the 14th Amendment, these state bills, the Arizona kind of legislation spreading across the land. And I know that there are many, many leaders in the immigrant rights movement who are also prepared to help back, that a relationship is a two-way street and that we can build it. And I really believe that if we can find a way together, if these two powerful, energetic, dynamic movements can work together, there is nothing that can stop us from building a more inclusive country. Thank you very much.